What if I told you that everything we say about ethics, about good and evil, right and wrong, is technically nonsense? And what if that's the very thing that makes it the most important thing we can possibly talk about? Well, that is the absolutely mind-bending idea from the philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein, and over the next few minutes, we're going to try to unravel it together. So to get started, let's just look at two things we might call bad. On the one hand, you've got playing a really terrible game of tennis, and on the other, telling a truly awful, preposterous lie. Now, both are bad for sure, but they feel fundamentally different, don't they? One feels like a technical mistake, while the other, that feels like a moral failure. For Wittgenstein, understanding that gut feeling is the very first step. So to solve this little puzzle, Wittgenstein first asks us to split our whole idea of value into two separate camps. On one side, we have what he calls relative value, and on the other, absolute value. And trust me, getting this distinction is the key to his entire argument. Okay, first up is relative value. The easiest way to think about this is good for something. It's a practical judgment, and it only really makes sense when you measure it against some kind of specific standard or goal. It's the kind of value we use every single day, most of the time without even realizing it. And what's so fascinating is that these relative judgments are basically just statements of fact in disguise, right? When we say this is a good chair, what we really mean is that it serves its purpose, it's comfy, it holds you up. When we say this is the right road, it just means it's the fastest way to get where we're going. These aren't some deep moral claims, they're just descriptions of how things work. Let's circle back to our terrible tennis player for a second. If I point out that you're playing badly, and you just kind of shrug and say, yeah, I know, I don't want to play any better, what can I possibly say to that? Nothing. The conversation just dies. My criticism is totally meaningless because it was relative to a standard, playing well, that you just don't care about. But now think about the lie. If you tell someone a ridiculous lie and they call you out on it, you can't just say, I know I'm behaving badly, but I don't want to behave any better. Nobody in their right mind would reply, oh, okay then, that's all right. No way. They'd say, well, you ought to want to be better. And that little word, ought, just hangs there in the air. It doesn't seem to depend on any goal. It feels like a judgment of a completely different kind, an absolute judgment. So if these big, absolute ethical judgments aren't just simple facts about the world, then what in the world are they? Where do they even come from? To get to the bottom of this, Wittgenstein invites us on this brilliant little thought experiment involving a book that contains, well, literally everything. I want you to picture a book. Let's call it the Book of the World. It's written by some all-knowing being, and it has a complete description of everything that has ever happened or ever will happen. Every atom's position, every star's movement, every single thought and feeling that every human has ever had. The complete record of all facts. So this book, it would describe a murder with chilling scientific precision, the velocity of the bullet, the cascade of biological failures in the victim's body, the exact neurochemistry firing in the killer's brain. And then it would describe a stone falling down a hill with the exact same neutral, factual detail. In the Book of the World, you see, all facts are created equal. Now for the million-dollar question. You could read this infinite book from cover to cover, absorbing every single fact about our universe. You'd find descriptions of joy, pain, birth, death, but you would never, ever find a single sentence that says, this is good, or that is evil. Ethical judgments, Wittgenstein realizes, are simply not facts in the world. They're not in the... Okay, so if ethics isn't a fact that we can just look up in some cosmic encyclopedia, where does that powerful absolute feeling come from? Well, Wittgenstein suggests it comes from these very specific personal experiences, ones that feel like they're pointing to something beyond the everyday world of facts. His number one example is the experience of wondering at the existence of the world. Now notice, he's not saying wondering how the world exists. That's a scientific question. He means the sheer, dumbfounding feeling that it exists at all. The sense that the universe itself is some kind of miracle. Another example is the feeling of being absolutely safe. And again, this isn't about being safe from, getting hit by a bus. It's a deep internal feeling that no matter what happens in the world of facts, you are fundamentally untouchable. It's an experience that feels like it's playing by a different set of rules. And this right here brings us to the core of the entire argument. What happens when we try to take these profound, world-transcending feelings and squeeze them into our everyday language? Well, according to Wittgenstein, we inevitably end up talking nonsense. And here's the amazing twist. That's not a mistake. It's the entire point. You see, for Wittgenstein, language is a tool that was built to describe facts within the world. So trying to use that same tool to talk about something outside the world is just a misuse of the tool. He uses this great analogy. Our words are like teacups. They're perfect for holding a teacup's worth of meaning. But ethics, value, the meaning of life, that's a gallon of water. And when you try to pour it in, it just overflows. That overflow, that spillage, that's what he calls nonsense. And here is the beautiful punchline. He realized the goal of ethical talk was never to state a fact correctly in the first place. The goal was always to gesture at something beyond the limits of facts. Its failure to make logical, factual sense isn't a bug, it's the defining feature. The very nonsensibility of the words is the signpost telling you that you're trying to say something of absolute importance. So in the end, what is ethics? What is this whole endeavor all about? Well, Wittgenstein leaves us with one last, incredibly powerful metaphor that just captures his entire view perfectly. He says that language, the entire world of facts, is like a cage. And all of our talk about ethics, about religion, about ultimate meaning, that's us running against the bars of that cage. And he admits it's a completely hopeless endeavor. You can never use the language of the cage to describe what's outside of it. But that attempt itself is what shows us what it means to be human. So the crucial takeaway is this. Ethics is not a science. It's not going to give you new knowledge. It's not a textbook of facts that you can memorize. For Wittgenstein, it's a document of a tendency in the human mind. It's that tendency to push at our limits, to try and speak about the things that matter most. And for that tendency, he says he has nothing but the deepest and most profound respect. And that leaves us with one final profound thought to chew on. If the most important things in life, value, meaning, ethics, are precisely those things that our language cannot contain, if they can only be gestured at, or shown, or felt, then what does that mean for how we should actually try to live our lives?